the #1 podcast. I am your host, Coach Jake. We've got people already jumping in on the Instagram. We do this live. So I don't know if you're watching this live or you're watching the recording, but either way, I am super stoked to have you here. Thank you so much. Lyrically Indigenous, what's up? Solomon Duaramez. I don't know, I'm messing that up, but appreciate you guys joining in on Instagram. As ever, if you guys want to get in on the action, make a comment. You agree with what I'm saying, give me a #1. You know how to do that little emoji. You can give me a #1 in the chat. You can communicate with me. I will read your post. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. Today, I'm going to tackle a very big and a very controversial subject. Now, it may have only just recently appeared on your radar, but this shit's been fucking with me since I was a child, and I want to talk about it. I wrote a big chapter in my first non-wrestling related book way back 2009, so we're talking 14 years ago now. But I wrote a book called Anomaly: Revolutionary Knowledge in Everyday Life. And talking about medical malfeasance. Now, you may have only recently come across this problem, and I hope that it's only been because of the news and that it hasn't personally affected you or a friend or a family member. But it is a very, very big, massive problem that very few people are talking about, although now, in light of the last couple of years, given the actions of Fauci and Trump, Biden, all those guys, it's tragically affecting a lot of people, unfortunately. I know that, there's the Twitter files have been what's up, Cameras and Catch? Good to see you, brother. I know that the Twitter files have only recently come out. So if you guys don't know about the Twitter files, it's basically it's a free speech movement that has taken traction on Twitter since Elon Musk's takeover, and it's made Twitter the fastest growing platform. Free speech. Yeah, people actually like free speech, and they've shown the level of manipulation. And this all harkens back to Noam Chomsky's manufacturing consent. Have you guys seen this, or do you know what Chomsky's argument is there? I don't agree with Chomsky in his prescriptions, but I do agree about his diagnosis. And that's kind of how I feel about the medical establishment as well. But what Chomsky pointed out is that in totalitarian governments, the way of control is through brute force, violence, things of that nature, corruption, fraud. In a democracy, the way that you control the population is through propaganda. Okay. And so the Twitter files are completely like a case study of manufacturing consent. And fortunately, Elon Musk has allowed this to happen. So there is a major social media platform that's not here to manipulate you or take all your data solely. Maybe it is, I don't know. But at least they're allowing dissenting voices. And recently, he's given voice back to guys like Peter McCullough, who is, I believe, the most published MD. I may be or may not be, but I've heard that. I think that's correct. He's got a voice, and he's very critical, especially of these mRNA vaccines, as well as Robert Malone, who's credited with being the founder or the creator of mRNA. Anyway, so all this stuff has made these concepts very, very relevant again, and made my chapter from Anomaly that I've changed it a couple times, but the meat of it is essentially the same. And I posted it up on my website, mentalselfdefense.com. You can go there, go into what's called iatrologic, which is a term that I took from a guy named Thomas Zaz, who's one of my heroes, and we'll be talking about him today. I gave his last in-depth radio interview before he passed. Super brilliant man. I'm so lucky to be able to meet him. And anyway, I'll be talking a little bit about that in the context of medical malfeasance. So I want to give you guys a little bit of a backstory, okay? So what we're talking about is medical harm, death by doctor. These are the ways that it's described colloquially, like just amongst normal people like you and me. But when the jargon that the medical industry uses to discuss this is called iatrogenic harm, okay? And that's otherwise known as harm caused by medical treatment or advice, okay? I need you guys to understand, and you could Google this. It is a significant problem, especially in the United States, okay? I was fortunate to talk to Dr. Barbara Starfield when I was writing my chapter of my book back in 2009. This is before she passed away. She was an MD at Johns Hopkins Medical School. She had written an article for the Journal of the American Medical Association, which I believe is the largest peer-reviewed medical scientific journal on the planet about iatrogenesis, or medical error, medical malfeasance, medical malpractice, harm caused by doctors, okay, by the current medical system. So she wrote this fantastic book or article in the Journal of the American Medical Association on the subject. But even more recently, the Journal of Patient Safety in 2013, which is the most recent numbers that we have, because they don't self-report this. And this is something that needs to change. And I hope it will. And that you see this also with the VAERS, the vaccine error reporting, the vaccine adverse effects reporting system. It's horribly awful. I worked as a statistician. I can tell you, if you have garbage going in, you have garbage going out. It's vastly underreported. But at least something's happening, and it needs to be improved. Anyway, the Journal of Patient Safety in 2013 estimated that 440,000 to 980,000. That means 500,000 to 1 million patients in the United States die, dead, like you're dead. That's it. Every year as a result of medical errors. Okay. So all you people that got this hard on about guns because you watch too many fucking movies and give a shit about celebrities like they have half a brain. Dude, more people are dying from medical error than anything. Let's see here. Who do we got? We've got Lightning Hardaway saying, fuck yeah, coach. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Out on Facebook. What's up, Biz Jitsu? So anyway, dude, 440,000 to 980,000. We're talking 500,000 to 1 million people die every year as the result of medical errors. Okay. So just medical errors, iatrogenic harm, medical malfeasance, those numbers, just those numbers, make it the third leading cause of death of Americans after cardiovascular disease and cancer. Okay? Now, this is where it gets fucking nuts. That's just iatrogenic harm, medical malfeasance. Okay? Somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million patients dead every year. Now, that's the third leading cause of death, only iatrogenic harm. If I add in, because I was a statistician, I know these numbers, and I was affected by this shit, so you better believe I got my shit together. I'll argue, you bring any MD on, you bring on any legal person, I'm happy to discuss this shit because I'm right. I've done this research for decades. Iatrogenic harm is responsible for 500,000 to 1 million deaths per year. This is according to the Journal of Patient Safety 2013. This echoes the research of Barbara Starfield out of Johns Hopkins in the Journal of the American Medical Association about a decade prior. Okay. That's 500,000 to 1 million just with iatrogenic harm. If I add in adverse drug reactions, ADRs, adverse drug reactions, okay, the Institute of Medicine estimates that's 1.5 million hospitalizations and another 100,000 deaths annually. Okay? That's insane. That is insane. Just the adverse drug reactions alone, or the costs associated with the damage that could have been prevented had they not been hawking this bullshit, is 136 billion with a B. Like, don't be a little bitch. Like a B. $136 billion a year in damage. That's the cost of just the adverse drug reactions. Okay. Now, like I said, this is 2013 numbers. This is not post-COVID where everybody took an experimental, and I'm not going to mince words. You could change the definitions under emergency usage or whatever. The shit's experimental. Typically a vaccine, and you could talk to researchers about this, takes 15 years of testing. Operation Warp Speed was not 15 years, and there are side effect consequences that everybody is aware of, and nobody's really talking about because y'all don't got enough fucking balls yet, or guts, whatever. But this is fucking killing people, and it's gotten way worse since all of the lockdown bullshit, okay? Because those numbers, those were 2013. It has gotten way worse. Do you guys understand this? This is a fucking massive problem. Massive problem. Just the iatrogenic harm, not the drug stuff, is the third leading cause of death of Americans. You don't fucking hear about it. You think it's car accidents. You think it's guns or something stupid. No, it's you going and getting bad advice, medical advice from professionals who are licensed by the state, mind you. Now, this is a big package to unpack. And I know none of you guys are going to go and actually read because nobody fucking reads anymore. So, and I'm an author. It kills me. I love books. But I do want to talk about the background here, because maybe if you're not going to read it, if you're not going to go to Mental Self-Defense and read the article, I could tell it to you. You could share this video. You might save a lot of lives. This is a very easy way to save people. Okay. Okay. Now, this all ultimately, in my mind, falls under the purview of medical ethics, or what are called bioethics. Does anybody even know what the fuck I'm talking about? Am I totally like nerding out and you guys are tuning out? This is probably the most important podcast in terms of affecting your life. I'm not being bombastic or exaggerating. This is true. So bioethical principlism is what I want to talk about for a moment. It's a medical ethical philosophy. Okay. It's a way of thinking about making ethical decisions in medicine and in biology. Okay. I guarantee you've heard a lot about it. You just don't know the terms that I'm talking about because I'm a fucking nerd. I've done that. I've been looking at this shit for 30 years in a serious, like, statistical way for 30 years, 3 decades, and my whole life, because I was almost killed by a botched surgery, and I'm lucky to be fucking alive. And I was 10, and I'm almost 50 now. So 40 years I've been fucking aware of this shit. Okay. Now, in the last 30, well, maybe in the last, really, maybe let's call it the last 20 years, I've been just hardcore on this, hardcore for the last 20. Now, bioethical principlism has 4 basic main principles. Okay, 4. And all you guys have heard of this. Okay. First is the good old Hippocratic Oath, right? Primum non nocere is the Latin for first, do no harm. Okay. That's called non-malfeasance in bioethical principlism. And I'll just call it principlism. So it's called non-malfeasance. Okay. First, do no harm. Primum non nocere. Right. And my idea that I've brought forth, and just like all my other ideas, because I don't get them out there and really give a fuck about copyright, it'll probably get ripped off. But I came up with the concept primum non nocebo. A nocebo is the opposite of a placebo, right? You give somebody a sugar pill and tell them it's medicine and they get cured. Well, a nocebo is you give them a sugar pill, inert, doesn't harm you. They take it, you tell them it's poison, and it fucks them up. Well, first, do no harm, or in primum non nocere, or first, no bad ideas, bad faith. Primum non nocebo. That's my idea. Anyway, bioethical principlism. Principlism has 4 principles. The first is do no harm, or non-malfeasance. The second is respect for autonomy. Informed consent. Consent, not duress. Like, get the jab or lose your job. Like, that just fucking happened. And we see it now in these people, like in the NFL, that were forced to keep their $1 million or take this experimental shit, and now they're dropping like flies. It's tragic, dude. This very well could go down as the largest crime against humanity in all of history for the number of people that were affected. And that's just on the experimental medicines, on the ADRs, the adverse drug reactions. The biggest crime ever, worse than the Nazis, worse than Mao, worse than Stalin, worse than Hiroshima. This shit. Mark my words, man. I'm right about this. Okay? So you first got do no harm, non-malfeasance. You've got informed consent or respect for autonomy. Okay? So both of those have been violated with the public policy under Fauci and everybody else that they've passed this bullshit with. I'm just being real, man. This is freedom of speech, okay? So this will be a test, because I know that I've already been shadow banned and shit because I don't care. But I care insofar as I want you guys to get this information. So pass it along while it's still there. The third idea in bioethical principlism is this idea of beneficence. So not just not doing any harm, but actually doing good. Okay. And then the last and fourth is treating people fairly, or this idea of justice, like fairness. Okay. So those 4 principles are all designed to help guide medical decision making, not just legal, which it is important. I mean, but as well as moral, which is to me more important and more. There's a lot of things that are legal or illegal and have nothing to do with morality about what's right or wrong. Okay. So do no harm, respect autonomy or informed consent, beneficence, or actually do good and be fair. All of those were fucking violated. Every single one. Now, why is that relevant? And how is that connected to political systems and legality and all this kind of stuff? Oh, let's see. We got Frankie out on YouTube saying heart attacks coming for the jab. Dude, and I feel bad, man. I knew this was coming. You guys watched me on my social media. I was fucking trying to be as loud as I could. From day one, I knew this was bullshit. It's all on record. So how is principlism and those 4 tenets of do no harm, informed consent, beneficence or doing good, and fairness, how are they related? We understand that morally. How is that related to legality and maybe some of the things that should happen now? So the thing is this. What's up, Mario Bartending? Happy to see you out on Instagram. Guys, chime in the chat if any of this is making sense. You think I'm full of shit? You can say it. I don't care, but you got to be willing to face the wrath of me, and I'll do it completely within the rules of debate. No ad hominems, no informal fallacies, but I'll fucking bury your ass because I know this shit inside now. Now, the connection between the moral ideas of principlism and actual legal frameworks and politics and world events. Okay. Bioethical principlism is actually deeply related in history to the Nuremberg trials that happened after World War II. Okay. Those principles that I mentioned in particular, such as respect for autonomy, informed consent and non-malfeasance, do no harm, were first really developed and institutionalized into a framework of philosophy and political system as a part of the reaction to the atrocities of the Nazis, what they did during World War II. And they didn't do it just to Jewish people, man. They fucked over the poor Jewish people. But Freemasons, homosexuals, like, dude, it was like bad. They fucked over everybody. Okay. So the Nuremberg trials, which there's people still alive today that were alive when the Nuremberg trials happened after World War II, and we hung people for what they did. And it was not even on the scale of what has happened. I'm not saying we hang people because I'm not a capital punishment guy, but I'm saying this is that serious. It's that fucking serious. Okay. So the idea is the Nuremberg trials were held to hold these people to account that did these awful things to everybody. And principlism, bioethical principlism, was derived from those trials into apply going forward, so that kind of shit would never happen again. And here we are, not even 75 years later, and it's on a scale that is so much bigger than we've ever seen before in history. Does this make sense? Okay. Now, how did all of this shit happen? And I'm only talking about the medical stuff. I'm not even touching on the economic impact of policy. The fact that you can look this up. It pushed something like 500 million people into extreme poverty, the results of the lockdowns. Okay. What's up, Adam? What's up, ISIS? Happy to see you guys. Chime in, man. I'm fired up talking about medical malfeasance. Okay. Now, you guys are going to want to go back. I'm not going to repeat this because I've only got so much time. We're already 22 minutes. And I was just explaining the medical, the scope of the harm caused by medical malfeasance, which has only gotten worse in the last 2 years. Okay. But this isn't just a 2-year thing. So don't make this about only the last 2 years. This shit's been going on forever. Since this is what I talk about in that book. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about what caused it. Okay. What's up, Callie Revoke? Good to see you, buddy. I argue in my book that a lot of this happened at the same time when our country had a lot of economic bullshit going on as well, just like we have today, right? A recession or whatever. 1913 was when the income tax was made law and the Federal Reserve was charted. Around the same time, this medical licensure was instituted. Okay, 1910 was kind of the beginning of it. It didn't actually really happen in 1910, but shortly thereafter, because there was a guy, Abraham Flexner, put out this report called the Flexner Report. You can look all this shit up. Flex, like flexing your muscles, Flexner, Flexner Report. Okay. And it was a study by this fucking guy. And I think it was funded by the Rockefeller Institute, if I'm not right, who's always seems to be somehow involved in some shady shit. By the way, they are now JP Morgan Chase, just if you're trying to follow the chain, because it was a bad brand, so they had to change it. Anyway, this report went around and it criticized the current medical system back then. Okay. Fair. I mean, people were doing dumb shit back then. They're still doing, like, it's still killing people today. So it's not like this Flexner report fixed anything. My argument is it made it 1,000 times worse. Again, just how it always is done, under the guise of like, oh, we're going to help you, we're going to save you. And it's just fucking worse. And you guys need to stop buying that fucking pitch. You need to be looking for results and what actually, like, look at history so you don't get suckered anymore. Does this make sense? Now, the Flexner report, right, really shows us this tension that exists between our autonomy and our individual health, us as individuals, and that of what the government wants to happen. This is also when public education happened too, which is a giant fucking disaster. Public education, let's not use that word, because again, that's a PR trick. Government schools are a fucking disaster. You have to go through a metal detector. People are getting shot and killed. My dad was chief of security for the Denver Public Schools. I know, and that was years ago before Columbine. It's even worse now. Okay? Now, again, that was just when, if you want to call it a political coup or whatever you want to call it, but the undermining of individual freedom happened by the federal government with that era, 1913, the Federal Reserve, the income tax, the 16th Amendment needs to be repealed, and this idea of medical licensure, because there were so many. Let's look at recent history now, and let's look at the Twitter files, okay, or the Fauci files, right? There were a lot of doctors dissenting. A lot of doctors dissenting. They had the same understanding and arguments that I did. I'm not a medical, but I've been affected by it. So I'm deeply invested in this stuff. And a lot of them were like dissenting doctors. They're like, this is bullshit. You can't be doing this. It's dangerous. You guys are creating fear mongering to put this shit through, and you're going to hurt people, which has happened. But instead of allowing them a voice, they were censored. And when censorship wasn't working, they threatened their medical licenses. You can talk to anybody that is got half a brain about this. This is what happened. But it wasn't just the medical licensure that made all the doctors comply and act in lockstep with what these dumb bureaucrats wanted to do to you and your friends and family. Okay? What's up, Dane? Good to see you, buddy. Thank you for joining, Marcelo. Happy to see you, bro. So anyway, it wasn't just medical licensure. It was all the business licenses. Hey, if you don't close down and toe the line, I mean, ask all these gyms and everything, your business license is going to be revoked, and then you'll have to pay fines and fees. Do you see how the control structure works, right? Does that make sense? So this is the problem, right? The Flexner report and this like broad control, this medical fascism, right? You have to understand, as defined by the founder of fascism, Benito Mussolini, fascism is the merger of state and economic power. Do you understand? The founding fathers were smart, but they could only deal with what they understood in their time. Like, you get more information as time goes on, and they were dealing with the shit of their day. Like, they didn't have fucking jets. They didn't have nuclear bombs. They were dealing with some other shit. And the first thing they did was separate the state and the church, because you end up with the Spanish Inquisition, where you're like, no due process. People are just being killed and tortured. Accusations, like the respect for innocence, the presumption of innocence, like the rights enshrined to trial by jury by the Bill of Rights. None of that existed. They took care of that massive problem that they were dealing with then by separating out the state away from religion. They didn't do such a good job of separating out the state from the economics. And now that's what we're dealing with. And in fact, after those founders died and we hit like 1910, you started to see a full-on assault to merge that power back between, and that's fascism as defined by the founder of fascism, Benito Mussolini. Okay? So this comes now to topics that you can start understanding if you follow political economic journals. Okay? A great school of thought called public choice economics, which basically takes the tools of analysis from economics and applies it to bureaucracies and government instead of markets. Okay. And they've got a couple of interesting concepts that I'd like to share with you guys. Have you guys heard of revolving door politics? Do you know what that is? I'm going to look something up on my phone so I get the facts, because I just posted this. Revolving door politics is when people go back and forth between government positions and private sector jobs. And revolving door politics particularly addresses these people going back and forth between government gigs and private sector gigs in gigs that are already highly regulated by, should be regulated by the government per se, right? So that creates a conflict of interest. That's because there's no separation here, right? Because they can then influence government policies that benefit these particular companies that they worked with and their cronies and their friends, and maybe they have stock. Hello, Nancy Pelosi. Like, there's even like a, I can't remember the website. I'll try to find it for you guys. There's a stock trading website that follows just the purchases of people in Congress, because this revolving door politics thing, this corruption, is a real problem. So another concept that's super important here, because I want to talk about the influence of big pharma with like the FDA and these organizations that are there supposed to protect you, and they do just the opposite. So you got to start looking at, like, what are people saying they're doing, and then what are they actually doing? Separate out and look at the results, look at the actions, okay? Study the history and stop falling for not only the lies, but being seduced into playing along or not having the courage to stand up when something is bad and it's not right. In particular, now me, I love principlism. I believe principlism doesn't just apply to bioethics. I believe it should be the entire way that the system is run. Do no harm. That should be the first thing. Second thing, informed consent all the way across the board. Third, actually do good. And fourth, right, justice, fairness, like actually be fair at the individual level, not groupthink. Now, beyond revolving door politics, there's this other concept in public choice economics known as economic rent seeking. Okay, this is when people use government power to create economic advantages for certain businesses and industry, rather than creating wealth through actual increased productivity or increasing, creating value through consensual organizations, right? And licensure falls into this. Licensure 100% falls into this. Because if now I force somebody like a medical professional to get a license, now it's very difficult for anybody else to get in and compete and provide a better service at a better cost. Does this make sense? It's actually medical licensure, business licensure, just licensure in general is a disaster. And it's the cause of a lot of these problems, even though they sell it as a cure, right? But it's iatrogenic. It's harmful. So this is where people talk about crony capitalism. I don't even like the word capitalism, and crony capitalism is okay, but I am a free market advocate. I do believe in small business, but you only get a big business if there is this kind of collusion between the state and a business, and then that business is like buying lobbyists, getting special favor. It's economic rent seeking. Does that make sense? And I don't like to call it any of that. I call it fascism. Charlotte Twite, great author, wrote about this in the 70s, called it some about fascism. Charlotte Twite, you can go find the book. I can't remember off the top of my head. But the other word that I like is corporatism, because that's what Benito Mussolini called it. Corporatism. That's what fascism was. And that's what we have, is rule by giant corporations that basically have so much power. Does that make sense? So, like Pfizer, let me give you an example here. Scott Gottlieb was the FDA director from 2017 to 2019, the director of the FDA. And then in 2019, when he left that, he went to go be on the board of directors of Pfizer. Now, Pfizer, not only do they make one of these shots that's killing people with side effects, this is a company that lost the largest criminal lawsuit in the history of lawsuits. And you're putting their stuff in your body? Experimental shit? I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know about this. This is no good, right? So Big Pharma is really a result of this revolving door politics and economic rent seeking, right? They've been accused, not just accused, but found guilty of using lobbyists, bribes, all kinds of awful stuff to shape policies in their favor, campaign contributions, right? And not only that, it's led to price fixing, the problems of a monopoly, higher prices for consumers. Man, I had a blood clot and I had to get on Xarelto. They wanted $400 a month. Whereas I go and I get an overseas pharmacy, it's like $100. Does that make sense? And not only does this this like problem with licensure and whatnot, and rent seeking and revolving door politics lead to harm. I mean, look at the opioid crisis, man. How many people were killed? That's not illegal drugs. That's legal drugs prescribed by medical professionals. I don't know what to tell you, man. You need to watch this probably a couple times to grasp what I'm saying, because you're not going to see it on the news, because every other commercial is paid for by one of these companies. They're not going to bite the hand. The news ain't going to bite the hand that feeds them. Does this make sense? Now, it's bigger than just that. When you look at the numbers of people on psych meds and the side effects, in particular, the violent side effects, we wonder, like, how come back in the 50s and 60s, kids 16 years old would be driving with a gun rack in the back of their truck to school? They would be doing shooting. There was none of this stupid stuff going on. How come it's only been, coincidentally, since the rise of selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, otherwise known as antidepressants, which have in the pamphlets, you read this, side effects, violent side effects, including homicidal ideation, means thinking about killing people, and increased suicidality, thinking about killing yourself. Sounds like every one of these guys. But you're not going to hear these connections being made on the news, right? I was very lucky. Like I mentioned, Thomas Zaz, he's been a huge hero of mine. He passed away a number of years ago. But this guy stood single-handedly in the face of all that shit. And in my mind, won and has been vindicated. Most of his ideas have now been proven, right? So anyways, I don't know if this is blowing your mind or if this is something you already fucking knew. I don't think so, because I talk to people all the time and I get all these dumb knee-jerk reactions, right? Let's go. Frankie on YouTube says, Nuremberg was a scam because a lot of Nazis came to America under Operation Paperclip to better. Yeah, I mean, most of them ended up in the NASA. I keep confusing Nazi and NASA. But yeah, like you're right. Like it was a little bit, they did hold some of them accountable, but a lot of them they actually brought in. And, there is an argument here that, again, like they've tried to diminish any of the facts that people bring up like this, the historical facts, with a label. It's known as ad hominem in formal fallacies, and that is saying conspiracy theorist, right? Or conspiracy theory. But like, these are conspiracy facts, and conspiracy is a crime. It is actually a crime on the books. And so, yeah, man, like they really did infiltrate the United States. And if you look at, for example, the Bush family, we know that the first president, George Herbert Walker Bush, I believe it was his father, and I can't remember his name exactly, but I wrote about this in Anomaly. He was a supporter of the Nazi Party and eugenics in general. And the whole genetics is a rebrand of this idea of eugenics, which is about genetic purity, which is, and Hitler writes in Mein Kampf, where he really got a lot of these ideas, was how the United States had treated the Native American populations and the African American population. There needs to be a real critical analysis of the things that I'm bringing up. I'm only one guy. I'd love to have an army of people all researching the bajillion things I brought up today and providing a unified factual presentation about this. Okay. But, people are easily manipulated by fear. And that's where we're at. And so, my story is that when I was 10 years old, I was extremely unhappy because, my parents had divorced when I was 4. I had moved around and I'd moved to this small town, and I was, really broken emotionally as a young man. And I was failing out of school, and a lot of it was because I was constantly playing hooky. And so my stepfather at the time, raging alcoholic, complete prick, took me. I was constantly grounded because of this asshole. Took me. He's still alive to this day. You know what I mean? Fuck him. But took me to his close friend, a medical doctor, Dr. Leone, and fuck that guy. And now that I'm an adult, I could see it, because I was a young man and I didn't want to go to school, and I was having all these problems, and I was really rejecting the way I was being treated and not treated well. I mean, I don't want to be dramatic, but let's call it abuse. And if we're being factual. And he performed an appendectomy on me that was not necessary. And I was too young and scared to know what the fuck was going on. And you know what that asshole told me? And my parents and my step parents to treat it? He left a gap about 3/4 of an inch, a hole in the incision, and instructed me to take baths. Now, you may not know what that implication is, but the dirt, bacteria, filth from your body, that's why you take a bath to clean, stays in the bath water, and all of it seeped into my wound. And within 3 weeks, I nearly died. I had like a fever of 100. I had the surgery in right after school was out, the beginning of June, between 3rd and 4th grade. Have the surgery, nearly die, have a fever of 105, 106 degrees on 4th of July. I remember it because it was like an emergency. I was going to die. I was pus coming out of me, gangrene. If you know what gangrene is. This is all because of a fucking doctor. And I was 10 and couldn't advocate for myself. Wheels me in to emergency surgery on the 4th of July. St. Anthony's Hospital overlooked a lake. It's no longer there anymore. Overlooked a lake in Denver called Sloan's Lake. I remember there was this hallway that looked over it, and I could see the fireworks going off on the lake. And I got the fucking anesthesia mask, and they're wheeling me in. That shit fucked me up. And honestly, I'm very skeptical about the treatment I received for cancer when I was a 15-year-old as well. Based on my research as an adult now. And those two things have fucked me up my whole life. I do believe that my carotid dissection, I only have one carotid artery left, due to chokes in grappling. I don't think it would have happened for me had I not been radiated due to the chemotherapy radiation stuff that happened to me as a teen. And even if it wasn't the medical establishment, I did grow up within 10 miles of Rocky Flats here in Colorado, which is, again, a gigantic government cover-up. You should look it up. It's known as the American Chernobyl. And very well, if it wasn't medical error, then it was because of a government cover-up. So, I hope you guys understand why I'm so passionate about this, why I'm so detailed about this, and why I'm willing to debate with anybody, because I know what I'm talking about. And I'm just going to be real. The powers that be don't like this. They don't like people like me talking about how it fucked my life over, and how, I've made my life amazing. But I imagine, what if these motherfuckers hadn't nerfed me early on? Because I'm an animal. What if I could get those fucking 10, 15 years of serious trauma back? I mean, maybe I would have wasted it. I don't know. Maybe it's because of that I'm successful. I don't know. But I do think there are actually people dying, and a lot of young, innocent people dying because they're trusting in authority that has a fucking shitty track record. Now, I don't know. Maybe I'm pissing you guys off because I don't see anybody chiming in. If you guys agree with me, if you don't agree with me, let me know in the chat. I'm not going to stay on here for much longer because I've got meetings that I've got to do. Hopefully this doesn't get banned. We'll see. I might only be able to put it on like Twitter and Rumble. We'll see. Anyway, I always appreciate you guys. You know, one of the themes of my life is overcoming. Like when I look back at my own personal history and my reminiscence, and I've gotten real good at it. Okay. That doesn't mean, I mean, I've had a lot of fucking trauma. Frankie says on YouTube, bro, you sound like you were in the MK Ultra program or Montauk. Dude, I don't know. Certainly sometimes feel like I was either part of an experiment or like one of the people that they're trying to wipe off the planet, right? Because all this ties into in a bigger scope of the ideas of Thomas Malthus and their implications and their applications by those people in power. And that is basically a depopulation or eugenics agenda. Shit hasn't changed. They just go through rebrandings and it's still the same bad stuff that all violate principalism. I encourage all you guys to look at it. Again, you can go to my website, mentalselfdefense.com. I talk about some of these things there. They're all in essay forms. A lot of it's just chapters of old books that I wrote and put up for free, so you guys don't have to bother with Amazon or anything like that. You can go back in the archives, look at my interview with Thomas Zaz. I think that was 13 years ago or something like that, 12 years ago, a dozen years ago, before he passed. I talked mostly with him because he was a rebel psychiatrist, like how Peter McCullough and Robert Malone are rebel MDs, dissenting. Another guy, John Ioannidis out of Stanford, brilliant man. I won't try to spell his name. Iaonnidis. I think that's actually right. John Ioannidis, great, brilliant, heroic epidemiologist and statistician out in San Francisco, totally silenced, was at the very beginning of this, very, very skeptical. Anyway, guys, give me some feedback in the chat. I typically don't go down this rabbit hole. This was more the purview of my old show, Mental Self-Defense Radio, years ago. This show is typically, aimed more at the overcoming part, not the diagnostic, but how do we get you to where you are free, financially free, personally free, spiritually free, those kind of things. That's where my particular emphasis is on, and having an impact in terms of allowing that to continue into the future. That's the legacy that I'm really going for, is this idea of individual liberty and the idea of consent, if that makes any sense. I think it's crucial. People say libertarianism or whatever, and it gets really bogged down. Let's just call it consensualism, that all individual relationships should be based on informed consent, the second principle in principalism, right? And I think it applies broader than just than biology or medical ethics, because we're all biological creatures. So it should apply completely across the board at every level of the political system. Anyway, guys, I hope this is okay for you today. I definitely nerded out, went into my old bag of tricks. The whole reason is because, I do have bad effects from the carotid dissection to this day, and from the cancer treatment when I was a child. And I just kind of got pissed off today. And I wanted to share some of these stories and some of these facts and statistics and ideas in the hopes that it saves somebody and improves somebody's life. Now, with regards to what I'm currently doing, totally not connected. This is just more of a public service announcement type of thing, of information and facts that I know that I think can help people. In addition to that, I've spent the last 20 years plus learning how to help people financially, and particularly in business. I know a bit, I have my master's degree in financial mathematics, or known as financial engineering, really is what the degree is, but people don't know what that means. If I can help you with any of this stuff, that is my purpose in life, is to liberate as many people as possible and help them personally, professionally, financially, and spiritually. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope this was okay for you. Hope this wasn't too heavy. But you guys have a fantastic day and a fantastic weekend, and make 2023 your best year ever. But do it by, having courageous. I think it was, what is it? Thucydides says the key to happiness is freedom, but the key to freedom is courage. And you just gotta stand up, man. And sometimes you gotta take whatever comes with that. But it's like, look at the founding fathers. They stood up. I'm not saying they were perfect. There's all kinds of dumb shit involved back in those days, but they stood up and they changed the world, and they changed it for the better. I mean, they might have made some real bad decisions on a few things, and I 100% agree there. But they also did some pretty amazing stuff. In particular, the Bill of Rights that ended up liberating so many people. Let's not lose that. Let's stand up and fight. Okay? Let's go for principlism this time, because all this shit, man, the system could all come down at any time. And it might be a little bit of a Building 7 engineered situation where they're demolishing it all. Let's make sure when the rebuilding happens that we fight for what's fair and beneficent and non-malfeasance and informed consent, principlism. All right, guys, I'm going to jump. I got another meeting here shortly. I appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to you soon.